She's Katie Montgomery. He's Justin Joseph. These best friends are serving subpoenas to bad advice weekly with Wrong Way Forward. Now, here's Katie and Justin.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. I'm Justin Joseph. She's Katie Montgomery. This week, we are talking about all things peeing, and by that, I mean bedwetting. Our text line has exploded over this issue that we talked about several weeks ago. And actually, what was funny is our title of our show that week, Katie, was doom scrolling by former bedwet or by confessional bedwetters or something, and literally that title went viral. We had more clicks on that on YouTube than anything.
Right,
so anyway,
it struck a nerve.
Yeah, and so this we've got a viewer email. Do you have that? You want me to read it?
Why don't you go ahead and read it?
So we got a viewer email, and this one wanted to stay anonymous for obvious reasons because there's a lot of shame in bedwetting.
There is.
And she said something to the effect of this, and I shortened it just a tad. You could tell that this person put a lot of thought into it. Something y'all have been talking about really hit me, bedwetting. I loved summer camp, but every year I arrived on with one secret mission: hide the fact that I peed the bed. Okay, who can relate to that? Other kids packed. We can talk about summer camp. I have horrifying stories of summer camp.
That's terrible.
Other kids packed one set of sheets and confidence. I packed like FEMA was on the way. Extra sheets and a plastic mattress cover, so it's so loud it could have alerted wildlife. She's actually a good writer. I always grabbed the top bunk in the back so that no one would accidentally sit under my wet bed. Spoiler, someone always found out. Oh, poor thing. One year I decided if I don't drink, I won't pee. So I dehydrated myself on purpose. Oh my goodness. Then camp makes us play this tennis game where you can't stop until you win. And I was so bad at tennis. It's July, hot as hell. I'm dehydrated by choice, and I'm straight up fainting in front of everyone. They drag me to the infirmary where I spend the night. And guess what? I wake up and I pissed that bed too. So now I'm just not the bedwetting kid. I'm the bedwetting kid with rage. I'll piss my bed and yours. Then I heard the nurse tell my mom I must be rehydrated because I wet the bed. My mom says loudly, yeah, that's normal for her.
So the mom sells her down the river.
The nurse builds her up with a beautiful excuse, and the mom sells her right down the winner. Camp taught some kids friendship and tennis. Camp taught me humiliation management. And I agree with Katie, bedwetters are elite crisis managers because nothing makes you think faster than waking up piss-soaked and your reputation on the line. Brilliant letter, and it hits home.
It really hits home. And I think it's a great lead in to kind of what we're talking about and kind of, is it the wrong way forward for parents to have favorites? And when I read this text, it made me think about, I was the only bedwetter of 4 children. And it just felt like my mom was just exacerbated with me. It was
disappointed
exhausting,
in you.
the disappointment. And, and it led me to this kind of, I had read this article in the New York Times is parents do have favorites. And when I read this kind of text, and we're assuming it's from one of our mutual friends who is a female, we don't know. She has not admitted it yet. So we have attached a gender, which might not be correct.
Is that who we think it's from, our college friend?
That's who we think, but I'll confirm later. I'll do a little due diligence. But It led me to be like, is this the kind of stuff that leads you either to become a parent's favorite because they feel like you need extra support, or does it lead you away from being the parent because you're such the pain in the ass? And so it's leading us to our topic today on Wrong Way Forward is it the wrong way forward for parents to have favorites? And Justin, do you think, you had a sibling. Do you think your parents had favorites?
Well, my parents listen to this podcast, and so does my sibling. So let me say this. I was shocked by the New York Times article where it said the facts are 2/3 of parents do have favorites. Now, I have no idea how they know that, if that's parents' admissions or children saying, I feel like they had favorites. I don't think the article didn't clarify that, did it, Katie?
Well, I think what was interesting is this is the work of Jill Suter at Purdue, and it's the largest longitudinal study based on parental favoritism. And so they had 500 parents. And I think what was interesting is parents wouldn't answer the question, do you have a favorite child? But guess what they would respond to is, which child do you spend more resources on? Which child do you feel more of an emotional connection with? And this is going to kill you. Your heart's going to break in half. Which child are you more disappointed in?
It's okay. In that case, I'm clearly a favorite across pretty much all three of those categories.
You're the favorite?
Well, I would not. I would say that, my brother is a brilliant, lovely human. He's an amazing father. And I just feel like he's easier to love. Let me say that.
And that is sometimes the version of favorite.
I read that in the article that sometimes it's, and I was a difficult
If you are
child.
agreeable, you are the parent's favorite usually. Because if you're easier to parent, that is a good indicator that you might be the preferred child.
Yes, and Jeff was much easier to parent. My parents would admit that out loud.
Yes.
They
we
would
all
say,
know this, Justin. We don't need to check with your parents.
They would say that because I was dealing with coming out and all of that kind of stuff, that's why I would just had a lot of rage. But clearly some of that rage is carried over. So anyway, but it's just that we're just such different people. He has kids, and of course, every parent wants to be a grandparent, and that's So I get all of that. And I don't know. Is it a favorite thing? No, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, I remember, because I was the kid who did ask my mom, "Do you have a favorite?" And she would very clearly look at me and she would say, "Katie, it's the one who's being nicest to me today." And that was very much my mom's personality. Like, I don't want to deal with your bullshit. And if you're nice to me, everything's in harmony and we're good. We always joke in my family. I think each parent had a preferred daughter and a preferred son. I think my mom, Charles, was her boy, and I think Patrick was my daddy's. And I think, there was a certain connection there. I think it was emotional, but I also think it was interest. Patrick played soccer in college. He was the last child. It was kind of living vicariously, and I think there was a lot of that piece. But I think what's interesting is I think it can vary. I think it's rare in families, maybe not according to this study from Purdue, but that, one child can be a favorite one week and the child can be, a favorite the next week. What I think is more interesting and maybe more relevant, well, I think there's two kind of things that are relevant to our listeners here, is that what they say is as you get older, and in this study, as you get older, what really kind of distinguishes who might be a favorite child when you might have children of your own is if you have similar values, you share religion and share politics, which makes sense because, again, it comes with, it's easier. There's not this disagreement, this fighting, this tension. But it's really interesting, too, what this was saying is that there are really some negative consequences if you have a favorite child. Those children tend to have higher incidences. The ones that are not the favorite tend to have a higher incidence of depression and anxiety, and sometimes kind of educational and financial outcomes vary differently too. So these 2/3 of the parents, who were part of the study who had a preferred child, it seems as though the outcomes aren't great. And so I guess the question is this the wrong way forward, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, well, I will say this, like, my parents, because Jeff, my brother, and I live such different lives in terms of, again, he's a father, he has children, I don't have children. They've also gone out of their way to make things equal. They will go overboard to make things equal. And I think that has to be an intentional choice as a parent, right? Because I do think some kids are easier to love. And so you'll have to make an intentional choice to make it feel equal. And I think they've done that very well.
And that's a real testament, because I think, I had amazing parents. And things were very equal in terms of how many Christmas gifts were under the tree, and what trip you got to take, or what your clothing allowance was. But I think when it comes to emotions and in the heat of the moment, and when you are tired and exhausted and in the red zone, that's really hard to actually portray that equality and to make sure that that's in place. And so really kudos to your parents, because I don't think my parents were that great at that piece.
I will also say, like, now I can say this because I have no problem with this. My grandparents, Jeff was their favorite, period. And there were examples that I have like 10 memories from my youth. I remember one Christmas I woke up, and my father owns a very high-end Indian jewelry store. My grandfather did in downtown Denver. And one Christmas I got a bolo tie and he got cash under the tree. And I was like 12 or maybe 7, I don't know. But I was like, I don't even know what this is. And Jeff's getting cash. And like the grandparents would bring him out to visit him every year. And so that kind of stuff I remember.
And how did that make you feel?
But I still remember opening the bolo tie. It was this weird bear with turquoise. And I mean, who gives a 7-year-old a bolo tie?
A grandparent who doesn't like his grandson.
So, I mean, like those kinds of things matter, and they are impressionable.
Well, I think, maybe what we could do is take a break and come back, because we have found some discussions online, what people do when their kids are inquisitive and say, who is your favorite? We want to see if some of these answers are the wrong way forward or not. We'll take that on the next side after this break. You've been listening to Wrong Way Forward, where bad advice goes to die and then gets resurrected just so we can roast it again.
If you're enjoying the chaos, hit like and subscribe and come back every Thursday for new episodes.
Have a new topic or some disastrously bad advice you want to dissect? Email wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. Include your contact info.
Now back to Wrong Way Forward.
Roasting the worst advice ever. Welcome back to the Katie and Justin podcast.
Welcome back to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward, where we are taking on, do parents have favorites? Research says the answer is yes. 2/3 of them, parents all across the country who are listening to this podcast, are taking issue with this, but the facts are what the facts are. And so research says 2/3 of parents have favorites. We're taking that on this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. Text us what your thoughts are. We have our text line active, 720-251-4450. Let us know whether you agree or disagree that parents have wrong way forward. And one of the things we're talking about this week also is, what do you answer if you are a parent and the child? And the inevitable question is, do you have a favorite? Did you ever see that movie, Katie, with Barbara Streisand, The Prince of Tides?
Yes, and I read the book. Which...
Of course you did. But that was like one of the greatest examples of like bad parenting. You remember the crazy mom, and the kids would come into her and say, and she would pull one aside and they'd say, am I your favorite? And she'd say, yes, but don't tell your brother. I mean, anyway, it was a really disgusting, impactful thing that she did. And it was.
And I think what's interesting, if we just, go back really quickly to the work of Jill Souter, is that, she says kind of basically that children love equality. And I see this every day with my niece and nephew. They're 3 years apart. And it is very much like, she got this, he got this, she got that, he got that. Kids are very focused. It is a huge value for kids, is equality. And so what they say is, first of all, parents and kids aren't talking about the inequality, but more that if you do treat children differently, the research shows that you should explain why. So I'm spending...
Interesting.
It was interesting because I thought the example was this, and I'm like, I think there could be some tweaking on this. But if you're spending more time with Bobby on his homework, you can say, Bobby needs more support because he's struggling at school. And
just don't say Bobby's special.
Yeah. So he's no longer your favorite, but you just gave him a complete and total complex about his brain and his intelligence. But if you can kind of explain why, I am, taking, your sister, to soccer practice because, et cetera, et cetera. But I think what was interesting is, we found what some people are doing in response to the question, am I your favorite child? And hopefully a lot of these people aren't doing what the mother character did in The Prince of Tides, which we know is just a horrific thing. So Justin, what are some of the examples that we're hearing about how to answer that question?
Well, I would say that the overriding theme, I would say 2/3 of the people that have responded, and there's a lot of responses on this Reddit thread, mirror what Gayle King says about her children, and it drives me nuts. She'll be like, oh, this is favorite daughter so-and-so, or favorite son so-and-so. A ton of people use that as sort of a way to get out of it. I just think it's almost cliche at this point. So reading through them, you both are is one of the answers. You won't be if you keep asking me that. That kind of mirrors what your mom said. One of my favorites was, I don't know, I'm still deciding. I think that's hilarious. That's like snippy, but it doesn't answer the question. That'd probably be my answer.
That would totally be your answer.
Now with my dogs, I do the Prince of Tides. Like, you're my favorite. Don't tell your sister. But they're dogs. I'm allowed to do that. But that's really kind of the overarching thing. Most people say, you're my favorite son. They only have one son. You're my favorite daughter. They only have one daughter, etc.
Well, this is going to make me sound like a total psycho, but I remember when my brothers, they started having children. And I'm like, Mom, do you love me or your grandchildren more? I mean, that's probably very telling. Anyone out there with a degree in psychotherapy is probably, diagnosing she's got some real issues. But my mom's like, I knew you first and the longest, you. And I'm like, okay, right answer. Let's move
That's
on.
a great answer.
I thought so. Definitely.
One of the, it also made me think of, I don't have children, obviously, but I have nieces and nephews, and we just went to dinner, and the podcast came up, and they said, "Be careful, you end up on Justin's podcast." I'm like, "No, you won't," and here I go. But I have a niece who came out, and so there's that connection there that my other niece and I don't have, and so I also feel like I need to be overly supportive because she's in the early stages of that. And anyway, I'm trying to be very careful about that. But
That's
of course,
good.
at Christmas, I handed out Christmas cards to everyone with money in it, and I effing forgot to put cash in the other one's card.
I mean,
And so
very Freudian.
I'm just carrying on. And poor thing, she has to go tell someone that she didn't get the cash that the other three kids, nephews and nieces, did. And so anyway, halfway through the party, it gets back to me that you didn't put money in your niece's card. And I'm like, oh, son of a bitch. So I had to give her double money because that's the only way I could make it. And so now I'm just, I'm like, here's twice the money. I'm sorry. And,
I know. Have you ever overcompensated before?
well, clearly, that's exactly right. So anyway, so yes, I guess I do have to be mindful of that with nieces and nephews as well. Do you, with your niece and nephew? I think you kind of talked about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, for me, it's like behavior, it's interest in me, it's the connection. But I mean, I love them all equally. But what's so interesting is seeing kids from the time they're born until they grow up. They just become such interesting people and they pick up such different interests, And there's certain times when I just find I'm a little more curious and more interested than others. But it ebbs and flows, right? And and I guess the right word would be sometimes I'm more curious about some than others. And it's interesting when they become teenagers.
Is that okay?
I don't know, but like when they become teenagers, they're less interested in you and they're less reliant on you. And and I think again, like you not having kids, there's something to be said about that, Aunt Katie, and just the excitement rather than like, oh, good to see you, Aunt Katie. I like a lot of enthusiasm.
Well, I know you do. And you like attention too.
I do. I love attention. So I am like you, aware of it. I know I'm not perfect and I know that it slips. And that's why I really feel for parents because I think it's incredibly difficult to work in the even Steven, this is always equal all the time with children, with everything that's going on and the ups and downs and your own kind of reactions and triggers and what's happening. So, it's a difficult task.
And the truth is you probably maybe do like one of the kids better than the other, but your job is not to show that. Do you think that's
Correct.
a fair statement?
I mean, I wouldn't go that far because I really think it varies. I mean, I think someone could be my favorite on Friday and I'll have a new favorite on Monday. I'm a pretty fickle person about that. You remember, Dad, did I ever tell this story? Maybe I got this from you or something, but it was like, who are your top 10 friends? And like put them in kind of order.
Well, to start it, we were driving back. We were on a college road trip driving back. Go ahead.
Right. And it was you and one of our best friends. I wasn't in the car. And I think y'all listed like top 10 people you wanted to hang out with. And I made the list, but it just kind of became this thing for me. Like, who are your top 10? And then I kind of put it into top 15. And it started to become this kind of way that I evaluated, not like in a manipulative way or like but it was more like, I one time used this with one of my friends and he's like, I don't know whether or not I want to go to this, this wedding that's out of the country. And I'm like, is he your top 15 friend? And he goes, well, let me see. And I asked these kind of questions and he goes, yes. Then I said, for a top 15 friend, you go to a destination wedding, right? And it was just kind of this thing. So, I mean, Justin, we don't have kids, but we do it with our friends. We do it with the people. I mean, we all tend to be drawn to certain people over others. And I think when you're in a group dynamic with a group of friends, I think you also have to be careful about that.
Constantly. And so did you opine whether you think it's the wrong way forward for parents to have a favorite? What are your final thoughts on that as we move to Block C?
I think good question. I don't think it's the wrong way forward because I think it's inevitable. And if anyone says that they truly never, ever have had one, I'm going to really call BS on that. I think the wrong way forward is not trying to be super hyper aware of it and trying to do the best to explain when there is a perceived preference, why that may exist.
All right.
What
I love
about
it.
you, Justin?
I disagree. I think it is the wrong way forward to have favorites. Like I said, that may be something that crosses, but I think it's your job as a parent to never let that on. And so the right answer is I'm still deciding.
There you go.
All right. We'll be back on the other side. Text us or send us an email whether you think it's the right or wrong way forward. Our text line is 720-251-4450. And our email address is wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. On the other side of the break, we're going to take a few of your emails, and this is my favorite one. The title is The Montgomery Grip Has Ruined My Life. We'll be back on the other side to talk about that.
Thanks for streaming Wrong Way Forward, the weekly reminder that advice is usually free for a reason. We call out bad advice wherever it hides: boardrooms, break rooms, and even book clubs.
Enjoying this dumpster fire? Like, subscribe, and check back every Thursday for new episodes. Want us to roast your favorite piece of nonsense? Email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to include your contact info. We're not psychic, just judgmental. And now, back to Wrong Way Forward.
Roasting the worst advice ever. Welcome back to the Katie and Justin.
And we're back. And what is interesting is we've been talking about parents that have favorites. I will say, Justin, that anyone who writes into our Wrong Way Forward podcast at Gmail or sends something to our text line tends to be my favorite viewer or listener. I really love those engaged listeners. And it's interesting, from last week's episode, I did get something, and this is from a high school friend I haven't heard from in a while, whose name is Karen. And I would like to state for the record, poor Karens. And she said, it's just been horrible that the name's been hijacked. And that is something that we didn't comment on. And it is correct, it's unfair that name has been attached to such nasty and horrible behavior. And I would like to state for the record I know multiple Karens. I can think of 3 from high school alone.
Yeah, you have a lot of Karen
graduating
friends.
class. Yeah. Who are excellent, lovely, open, intelligent, and embrace diversity, that are absolutely not the mean Karens. So just for the record, wanted to state that in terms of what we've heard from our listeners.
And on that note, it was educational to me last week when we talked about this, because I really did associate racism with Karen, and that's just not part of it.
I mean, it can be, right?
It can be, but
I don't think that it is an absolute necessary requirement, but you do see some overlap.
Okay. Oh, that sounds like a whole nother show topic. All right. Anyway, you're back to your email.
And so, Justin, I think you just kind of teased something about the Montgomery Grip, and I'm very nervous as to what that message is.
Well, for those of you who have not yet listened to last week's episode, I always talked about in college, Katie had this thing we called the Montgomery Grip, and it was powerful and mesmerizing. And she'd come up and she'd just do a slight touch on me. I'm like, how are you? And then she would turn it. She'd be like, Dune. She's like, how are you? And then she'd either go in for something she wanted, or she would pull the rug out from underneath you and say something like, this is cute. Like, and she hated it. So anyway, this person wrote.
You have just painted me out to be a horrible, manipulative person who sounds like I've been raised under a rock. Yes, I am not a Karen.
You are not a Karen, 100%. But anyway, this hit a note with this viewer. Dear Katie and Justin, the Montgomery Grip has ruined my life. I learned today that I've been on the receiving end of the Montgomery Grip for years and didn't know it had a name.
Justin, who is that?
Somebody named Tina, I don't know. Someone at work grabbed my arm and said, I love you, and then absolutely nuked my self-esteem, and I realized that it is a learned behavior. Katie, please issue a public apology to everyone you've ever gently touched.
Is this person saying she got the Montgomery Grip from me, or is she labeling someone
just says
else?
She doesn't realize this has been in her life before she ever knew us for a million years.
Well, I'd like to say, I'm not going to apologize. I'd like to say you're welcome for making
It's a public service.
Yes, it's a public service. Now you are aware of this behavior, and you can create a healthy boundary or have an important discussion.
Oh my God, this show has saved people's lives.
Yes, exactly. Maybe that wrong way forward. Saving lives daily.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, that is hilarious. That was my favorite viewer email. The other ones were just kind of some stuff. Cold French fries are a gateway drug. Talks about how someone freaking out of a cold French fries turning into a Karen. It's a gateway drug to being a Karen. That's pretty funny.
That is pretty funny.
What's that?
I said, that is pretty funny because Because you could see someone pulling, not really being a Karen, but pulling that and being allowed to get away with it. And the recipient not standing up for themselves or not having somebody, intercede on their behalf. And then that person's emboldened to have bad behavior again. It's kind of sometimes when I think about like in the workplace, like you don't nip that toxic shit in the bud early on. People just have, carte blanche to do it all the time. And so I could see that. I think that's a very important point.
All right, so here's something we have not talked about, Katie, but I want your take on it.
Yes.
I don't think you know this show, but I know for certain you don't watch it, but there's a show called Traitors. Have you heard of it?
I have heard of it and is on my list to watch, but I'm 4 seasons behind, so I'm kind of overwhelmed.
Oh, start at season 1. They're all great. Anyway, and the Housewives are on it. You love the Housewives, don't you?
Yes, I do love the Housewives.
Yeah, Housewives are on this. Lisa Rinna's on this latest. Anyway, they've always done celebrity version of Traitors, but they're doing a non-celebrity version. And guess who wants to apply? This guy.
Is his name Justin?
Yeah, it's the greatest show ever.
Well,
Anyway,
you're good at manipulation, and I think the word traitors. I'm sure, like there's but that's a synonym, right?
Yeah, but they asked
Manipulator, traitor.
in the video. They asked, "Why would you be a good traitor?" And I'm like, I'm going to ask Katie why she thinks I'd be a good traitor.
Well, I think you're very clever and smart and creative, so I think you can always figure out an angle. I think having been a defense attorney, having been a journalist and a real estate agent, I think the common skill among there is being able to connect with people, to read people. So I think you've got a lot of experience in that space. I think you can definitely bring drama to the show. And I think that makes it really interesting. I think that you do take yourself seriously, but at the same time you don't. So I think there'll be a level of humor around it. So I think you'd be an excellent applicant. I think you'd be an excellent traitor.
Yeah, I think I'd be an excellent traitor. Having said that, you've got to watch the show. It's the greatest show on TV. And we were not going to waste any more time on that. But anyway, all right. Well, do you want to read your Karen email, or you want to save for next week? Didn't you get an email from Karen, or you were just summarizing it? Yeah,
I was just summarizing it. But yes, we do apologize, and we do have the footnote that some Karens are beautiful, lovely people that we all aspire to be, because unfortunately they've gotten stuck with that name. But with that being said, thank you again for joining us for Wrong Way Forward. We'd love to hear from you. Again, the email is wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. So we'd love to engage with y'all more, and we hope to see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
All right, that's a wrap on this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. Remember, the only thing worse than taking bad advice is giving it.
If you've liked what you've heard, like, subscribe, or follow us wherever you stream podcasts. And if you've got a topic or need some advice we'll probably regret giving, email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward.